Previously on The Living Dummy. So, this creepy ass book was just dropped off at my door. Okay. Something written in a lot of these pages here. There is one passage that I can kind of make out. It's, goes something like Karu Mari Odana Loma Milano And now, The Living Dummy, Chapter 2, First Contact. Game review. So this week I thought I'd play a legit good game, Castlevania for the NES. By now we're all pretty familiar with the story, I think. The Belmont family every 100 years or so has to take out Dracula. Pretty simple stuff, but don't let that fool you. Castlevania is one of the greatest games ever made. So without further ado, let's get to it. These dogs, man. I always try to aggro them at the furthest possible point, but no matter how far away I am, they always get me. Alright, so the first boss is just a shitty bat. Nothing too spectacular here. If you have a weapon, this fight is incredibly easy. I have no idea what these crowns do. There are a lot of weird items in this game that just confuse me, like, do they add to your score or something? Who the hell cares about that? I swear the Medusas are my biggest weakness in this game. Well, in every Castlevania game, really. And that's another thing. Why is it that when I'm facing the opposite direction, I always get knocked toward the pit? That pisses me off. Thank God. Now what was that shit? Fuck! What a bunch of bullshit. How many of these ridiculous flying heads does there need to be? It's hard enough trying to land on these fucking platforms without all these zigzagging bastards coming after me. All this horse crap? Ain't that right? Where did you come from? That was weird. Sorry to say this, guys, but I don't feel like playing Castlevania anymore. There is something, however, that I've been meaning to do since the Goosebumps review-a-thon, and that's to see what Slappy's been up to since the 90s. And as it turns out, I have all the books to feature our favorite block of wood since that time, so give me a moment while I go grab them. Okay, so the first book to resume Slappy's adventures is Bride of the Living Dummy, book number 3 in the series 2000. There's nothing much new here other than, oh yeah, Slappy's origins. Finally, 5 years after introducing the character in 1993, R.L. Stine tells us that Slappy was made out of coffin wood by an evil, unnamed sorcerer, and that this sorcerer's evil resides in the dummy. How cool is that? Slappy's Nightmare is up next, book 23 in the series 2000. Slappy's owner from the previous book, Jimmy O. James, has had it with Slappy, so he decides to read an anti-life chant to put Slappy to sleep forever. Kala Mia Aruma. There's more to it, but Slappy eventually calls for a truce. In order to stay on Jimmy's good side, Slappy has to be good himself for a whole week. This sets up a funny series of misadventures with another dummy who is trying to get Slappy to fall off the wagon, so to speak. But it all ends up being a nightmare anyway, or does it? This one was good, if for nothing else, in that it at least tried to break up the formula of the dummy books. Alright, So now we're getting into unexplored territory for me personally. I stopped reading Goosebumps with the series 2000, so for me my recollection of the series ended with the close of the 90s. This book was published in 2008, so our hero Slappy has been sitting idly by for 8 years or so before he was called back into action. Was it worth it? Right off the bat, you can already tell they changed his appearance. Tim Jacobus is no longer the illustrator here, so it makes sense he would look different. I think he looks badass. Again, there was an 8-year gap between the Series 2000 and this book. And while R.L. Stine feels that this is one of the scariest books he's written in the entire series, I felt it was just your typical Slappy story. There was an interesting ending with something called a Mind Stealer doll, but it was the same basic outcome with Slappy getting quote-unquote killed, because you know he'll be back for more. Slappy New Year is probably the most hardcore of the Living Dummy books yet. At the kids' New Year's Eve party, we finally see R.L. Stine completely unleash Slappy, throwing paint cans and shit everywhere, just really showing he's a supernatural force like Jason Voorhees in the 6th Friday the 13th movie. And there's also a rare occurrence of a character in a Goosebumps book having a character arc. Not bad. The Son of Slappy is probably my favorite of the new Slappy books. Probably of them all, save the first one. Finally, Slappy gets his slave. You heard that right. Slappy gets his slave. In a scene that's identical to the seduction scenes in Under the Skin starring Scarlett Johansson, the main character Jackson Stander feels himself sinking underwater, sinking into a deep darkness. He then hears a loud chirp. Slappy throws his head back and laughs. Jackson can't help but do the same. Huh. Now we're getting into the current run of Goosebumps books. And what's cool about this series is that it's hosted by Slappy himself. He'll pop up now and then in between chapters to give us his trademark wit on what's going on in the story. Well, you'd think that for a series called Slappy World, that it would not end with the defeat of Slappy, but you would be wrong. What gives? Doesn't he have final say in what happens in these stories? I think it would be pretty funny if, when he's about to meet his doom, he enacts some form of Deus Ex Machina to save himself at the last moment. I mean, he even says it at the end of the book. This is Slappy World. You only scream in it. Hire yourself better writers, Slappy. Some that are willing to at least work with you. I'm available. And finally, we have the most recent book to feature Slappy, I Am Slappy's Evil Twin. The only thing really noteworthy about this book is the prologue. It's cool as hell and feels like classic horror, like something out of Frankenstein. Just substitute Franz Mayhar for Dr. Frankenstein and Slappy for the monster, and you'll see what I mean. There's even an angry mob. And did I mention that Mr. Wood returns in this book as well? We haven't seen him since the first Dummy book, and he and Slappy raise the usual sort of hell here. You know, you'd think that after all these books, that not only will we see Slappy get his slave, but that he would actually get some sort of payoff with it. I mean, what's the point of having someone under your control if you only use them to bug their kid's sister? Would your balls fall off? You spend all this time trying to possess somebody and you do diddly dick with them once they're under your power? What's the end game here? Anyway, these are just kids' books after all, so maybe I'm getting too worked up about it. I just had a great idea. I have a dummy sitting right here, right? I could build an act around him, air out all these grievances on the road. It could be funny. We complain about how Slappy never gets his due, and what we would do if we ever had the chance... if he ever had the chance to follow through on an evil plan, and how far he would take it. That'd be perfect for kids, right?